think about what your voice sounds like. Just get into the feeling of what we're saying. Okay.
Your mic is not.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's not on your head.
Okay. All right.
Hey, there it is.
All right. We're getting our act together. Perfect. Okay.
Gotta actually put it on.
Thank you.
Josh noticed before we
Speak with the mouth of God. Love with the heart of God. Walk with the feet of God. Sing with the voice of God. Live in heaven. Here and now. Live in heaven. Here and now. Dance with the soul of God. Walk with the grace of God. Breathe with the air of God. Think with the mind of God. Live in heaven. Here
Good morning, everyone. On Friday, having dinner with a couple of friends, I used the phrase useless, unnecessary suffering. And my friend, when I was finished giving a really short explanation of that, asked me, what is real suffering? And I responded, as I always do, that real suffering is when you lose a loved one that you've been close with to death, or you maybe perhaps have your home and all your possessions burned down. There's definitely real suffering. But when you look at it from a clear, open-minded perspective, useless, unnecessary suffering constitutes about 90% of all the suffering in the world. Useless, unnecessary suffering is a suffering caused by mind-made projections of guilt, unworthiness, blame. So that's what most people put themselves through, is useless, unnecessary suffering. Because most people live by the conditioning that they should know things. And because of that, there are issues that come up which they believe others should really have known better than to involve themselves in those issues. Or they blame themselves and say, well, I should have known better. They don't usually blame themselves outwardly, but inwardly. And then they go about thinking that that was a terrible thing that I was involved with. And so the whole idea of blame and guilt and everything that goes with it is useless. It's unnecessary, because we humans do not have the ability to effectively judge. We can judge little things, small things, about whether or not we want salt on our food, or we want to take the car to get it washed, and we judge it because the car looks like it needs to be washed. But when it comes to real judgment, we don't have the ability to judge. Certainly don't have the ability to judge another person, because we have no way of understanding what that person has gone through. And so we couldn't possibly understand what motivates someone to do things that seem to be out of touch with consideration and kindness, friendship. But there are things that cause that to happen, and we're not capable of accessing that. So judgment is really impossible. You know, they have that statement, don't judge anyone unless you've walked 2 weeks in their shoes or 2 miles in their shoes. But it goes beyond that. We simply don't have the ability, though the ego-centered idea of life seems to get us to believe that we do. that we look at this tiny little section of a person's expression, and out of that we can make all these incredible judgments, which are never true. So we should be keenly aware of that truth on this spiritual journey, which is related to us in so many ways. And here it's related to us in A Course in Miracles. You can read this in the old text, page 187, paragraph 2, or the new edition, page 202. If your brothers and sisters are part of you, and you blame them for your deprivation, you are blaming yourself. And you cannot blame yourself without blaming them. That is why blame must be undone, not seen elsewhere. Lay it to yourself, and you cannot know yourself, for only the ego blames at all. Self-blame is therefore ego identification, as much an ego defense as blaming others. You cannot enter God's presence if you attack his Son. To understand this last line is all-inclusive. You cannot enter God's presence if you attack his Son. You see, from the perspective of A Course in Miracles, God's Son is every living person. And so we are called out of the illusion of separation almost continually in A Course in Miracles. The illusion of specialness, the illusion of a body-encapsulated mind capable of objective observations. We're called out of that by A Course in Miracles. And here, when it speaks of God's presence, it's speaking about all-encompassing awareness of love without conditions. God's presence is the all-encompassing awareness of love without conditions. It's universal consciousness, and that is the consciousness to which we are called. And when we begin to arrive in that awareness, we recognize what it means to be truly alive, and to recognize what it means to have not been truly alive. And so that's our journey through this life experience, so that we can finally love all of life. You know, it's always been a curiosity to me that there are some people, let me put it this way so we can understand it. There are some people who have a beautiful face, and I'm sure you can identify that, a beautiful face. And it can be, sometimes you'll see it in children, or even in older children, teenagers. And sometimes you'll see it in mature adults, but you'll see someone who has a beautiful face. And it goes on, you can, even people that are up there in years, sometimes you see someone with such a beautiful face. And it's always been a curiosity to me, especially when you see it in someone who is like, you know, maybe 15, 17 years old. And you wonder, is the mind of that person so innocent that it just radiates beauty? Or is that mind at a place where it has not yet been tested by the difficulties and disappointments of life? I don't know, because you see it in every age. I'm not talking about, there's not It's not like you see lots of beautiful faces. Most faces tell the story of life and its challenges and what that particular soul has met through this body experience. But then you see occasionally someone, and I joke about this to Norma all the time. I said, oh, look at that person. Look at that person. I said, so God really took his time making that person. But what has he done to me? What did I ever do to him? I still have that curiosity to see that. And I'm sure that you've done this too. You've had occasions where you've seen someone who is just, I don't know, beautiful. I'm not just talking about these models. That's not what I'm talking about. There's a beauty that radiates around them in their aura. I just read one of the stories in a book titled Love Stories by Trent Dalton. And he's an author in Australia. And for this book, he sat out on a corner in some area where he lives. And he had his typewriter there, and people that stopped by, he would ask them to tell him a love story, their love story, or any love story that they were aware of. So he created this book. And one of the sections of it is about this mailman that stopped by to speak to him. He said, well, do you have a love story? He said, my marriage of 31 years is a love story. He said, I cannot say how blessed I really am, because for so many years, into my 40s, I lived what most people would call an ordinary life, but filled with disappointments and grievances that I've had. And I never really felt there was such a thing as love, to feel love, until I met this lady that exudes love. She simply exudes it, and love follows her wherever she goes. For 31 years, I have watched this phenomena of this woman who I am so blessed to have as my partner. But wherever she goes and whatever she does, wherever she makes contact with another person, that person brightens up. And you can see they've opened up to the love that's inside them, to the love that everyone actually has and can access, but she brings it out of them. So love follows her. And the writer interjects how he's not quite sure that he really grasped that this is possible. But in any case, the mailman explains it in this way, in this particular story. She's special, he says. How so? I ask. Love follows her around, he says. I smile at this unusual line, and Robert, who is the mailman, the retired postman, knows from the way I squint my eyes and bite my top lip and nod my head that I don't fully understand what he means. If you have a lot of love in your life, if you put a lot of love out into the world, then love follows you around, he says, with a knowing smile. It follows. If you have a lot of love in your life, if you put a lot of love out into the world, then love follows you around, he says, with a knowing smile. It follows you. So this is such a high calling. There are a number of different yoga paths that human beings can find their way to and on to gain access to their divine reality. You see, most people, especially in the Western culture, no longer consider that they have a divine reality. Their reality is life as it unfolds before them, day after day after day, and their understanding of life comes from their experiences in the world. So most people don't have an understanding, and therefore they don't open up to the possibility that there is this divine core nature, or this consciousness of God residing within them. And yet we are all made in that image and likeness of God, but we have so lost touch with it so that we don't actually feel beloved. And because we don't feel beloved, we don't carry that kind of influence with us into our experiences with other people and life in general. But it's interesting when you see it. Occasionally you may feel it, especially if you're in unity and you're practicing the presence of God. I mean, which literally makes every other practice incidental. To practice the presence of God, in other words, to be so filled with the presence of the love that gives us life, and to see the sacredness of all life, because that is the presence seeking to understand itself. And regardless of how limited someone else's expression of God may be, that person is still a child of the living, present God and seeking its way. Because when anyone finds the consciousness of God and lives in and from the consciousness of God, there isn't anything as valuable, and there is nothing that even can compare to the value of it. So that it seems as though you have given up the world. And in fact, what you have done, listen very carefully to this, because if this isn't happening to you, it will happen. By virtue of the majesty of love, we willingly detach from all the seeming pleasures and treasures of the world. We become an instrument of accepting and blessing and bestowing peace. So this is a beautiful calling, and not everyone, many people come to it in many different ways. Some people have to crash and hit bottom heavily, and in other words, to even begin to rethink their existence. There's such a beautiful story about this fellow that his life wasn't going well at all for him. And he's already up there in his 40s or so, and he decides to go to this property which is on the Atlantic Ocean, and there's like this cove there where he'll go scuba diving. The water's very cold, but he makes contact with this octopus, and the octopus relates to him and touches him, was on his hand. They did a documentary about this guy's experience into the consciousness of what he's going to say in this particular clip. Can we have this?
I was around for a good 80%.
That's not exactly the clip that I had intended, but it's okay. It's telling the same story about this octopus that he went to visit. He scuba dived every day and created a relationship with this octopus, which would climb onto him and be part of him. And he has a line in the clip that I wanted to share, and it is what I learned from that relationship. It's something I hadn't learned about anything in life. But what I learned from that relationship is that I was a part of everything and not just a visitor. And that's where our destiny lies. And how we get there is interesting for many different people. And of course, it's rejected by most in our culture, especially because of the distractions and limitations and fears, concerns that go with living and trying to keep up with a world that keeps changing, moving faster and faster. And so we feel bound to somehow or other keep up and find a way to survive. And we don't have the willingness to take the time to just feel ourselves a part of everything, one with everything, which is, of course, what the masters down through the ages are espousing, the idea of this oneness with everything. You see, what happens in that state of awareness, which is love without conditions, is that it changes the way you see everything and everyone. Because you no longer see in terms of the separation and the egos. You see in terms of all that is sacred and all that is worthy of love without expression, without exceptions. So we'll have to, most of us are not going to scuba dive, try to find an octopus to relate to. We're going to have to use one of the traditional paths, which is to learn how to catch and release grievances. If we're seriously on the spiritual journey, we need to be serious enough to be awake through introspection to recognize when a grievance of some kind has entered our awareness and we're entertaining negative thoughts and negative feelings about something or other. So that in that relationship, you see what has happened is grievances cut us off from the awareness of the presence everywhere, the omnipresence of love without conditions. But grievances immediately stop, block that. It's not that this presence denies us entrance at any time. It is that we, the mind, denies us entrance, and it denies us living beautifully, effectively, joyfully in the awareness of the presence of love in everything we look upon. So A Course in Miracles will again speak to this. You can read this in the workbook, page 137, paragraphs 2 and 3. Today we go beyond the grievances to look upon the miracle instead. We will reverse the way you see by not allowing sight to stop before it sees. We will not wait before the shield of hate, but lay it down and gently lift our eyes in silence to behold the Son of God. He waits for you behind your grievances. And as you lay them down, he will appear in shining light where each one stood before. For every grievance is a block to sight, and as it lifts you, see the Son of God where he has always been. He stands in light, but you were in the dark. Each grievance made the darkness deeper, and you could not see. Can we take this back again, please? I mean, can you imagine someone writing this, just taking the time to sit and write this? It is so absolutely true. To be able to be that absolutely true. So here it comes to, if you had nothing else, this is A Course in Miracles in short. It epitomizes the essential ideal of God consciousness in A Course in Miracles. Today we go beyond the grievances to look upon the miracle instead. We will reverse the way you see by not allowing sight to stop before it sees. We will not wait before the shield of hate, but lay it down and gently lift our eyes in forgiveness, lift our eyes in silence, allowing forgiveness to precede us in every seeming confrontation, to lift our awareness in silence, to behold the presence of that love without conditions. That love waits for you behind your grievances, and as you lay them down, he, this living presence, will appear in shining light, where each one stood before. For every grievance is a block to sight, And as it lifts, you see the Son of God, where he has always been. He stands in light, but you were in the dark. Each grievance made the darkness deeper, and you could not see. That's the whole of A Course in Miracles in a couple of paragraphs. And so that is why meditation is so important. To take some time out each day to open up in awareness, allow an awareness to rise that is beyond the incessant thinking of the mind, which is what Tolle's term is. Eckhart Tolle says that the incessant thinking of the mind is based on always attempting to get something done, fixed, more. And when we relax that, we allow something more magnificent to rise, and it changes the way we see. So we're going to do that now. We're going to meditate together. Just begin to listen to this beautiful crystal bowl and realize in every moment, in every place, under any and all conditions, there is this presence that is our true nature, which exudes love without conditions. So, recognizing that this is our destiny, let us use this particular mantra to recognize what it is that our lives truly seek. Everything else has been but a distraction. What does one truly seek? And we can find it if we can just gently rest in what we are, knowing God is love. Love is life. I am God's life. I am. God is love. Love is life. I am God's life. I am. God is love. Love is life, here, now, and always. I am God's life, here, now, and always. as we go forth from this meditation to those places we occupy in the world. Let us go forth with a greater determination to recognize the sacred presence in every moment, in every place, in every condition. For this opportunity in every moment, we give thanks. To this we say, Amen. We will take an offering for unity now. Those of you that are watching live stream, you can click on donate and make a donation to Unity of Boulder. And everyone here can bring into their hands that gift to Unity of Boulder. Let's bless this offering gift with this offering prayer. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, all that I receive, because I give. So it is.
Spread over us wings of your peace. Spread over us wings of your peace. For with you is the source of light. In your light do we see light. We see light. We see light.
Join me now, please. We dedicate this tithe to the will and the work of the Spirit of truth, the Spirit available to each of us, the Spirit that joins all of us. We dedicate this tithe to the victory of the Spirit of truth. Amen. As usual, we will have a discussion for anyone who'd like to stay in Fellowship Hall. In the back area, there's a dance floor. There'll be chairs. We have refreshments also in Fellowship Hall. You can pick up some tea and some crackers or whatever it is you'd like to chew on, and you can join us for the discussion about this talk or anything to do with unity. Have we anything else?
We'll be meeting at the Mexican restaurant today
Today?
after the second service.
Okay. And that is Agava? Is that the name of it?
A Mariposa.
The
Mariposa.
Mariposa. So it's changed. And that's on that little shopping center on 28th.
The Tebow Plaza.
Yeah. Okay. So you can join us there for lunch. It's a pretty good lunch. It's about what? $14, $15. All right. To everyone, have a love-filled day.